Welcome back to the Extra Rep podcast, guys. I'm Josh, and today we just have me. So no Liam. We've both been really busy. So I thought today it would be really good for myself, obviously doing a solo episode, is to just talk a bit about, I guess, my last 10 years of coaching, sort of what I've learned, sort of a few mistakes I made along the way when it first came to obviously my health, fitness, nutrition, all that sort of thing. And then obviously how I've built, my business now to obviously coaching, people from not just Australia, but, I've had a few around the world now, which is awesome. So I think a good place to start would be to be, looking back probably in terms of number one, my health and fitness, but obviously number two, my, I guess my journey from, becoming a personal trainer and having my first coach and going through that process there. So obviously I was always a pretty, I guess, active child and, played soccer at a fairly high level up until about 16, 17, did some trials in England and things like that. But then obviously came back, figured out it probably wasn't something that, I want to do for the rest of my life. That, and I definitely wasn't good enough either. So, sort of got to the point where fell out of love with soccer a little bit. I used to train and play about 7 days a week. So it was my life. And then obviously when I was 18, 19, obviously started getting into, going out, having a few drinks, and then started DJing from there. So obviously, as you can imagine, going from, training and playing 7 days a week to slowly limiting that as I increased my, going out and alcohol consumption, my body suffered, dramatically as a result. And again, I was young, I was having fun, absolutely no problem with that. But, it got to a point, obviously, where I was DJing. And then obviously I got to the point where about 2016, I think it was, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? I was doing some jobs on the side at the local leisure centre, managing lifeguarding, etc. The gym was always something that interested me. Like I'd always wanted to do something that wasn't, an office job tied to a desk, which is quite funny because that's half of what I do now, coaching everyone online. But it's one of those things where, getting to that point of, deciding I wanted to do that. Obviously I was in and out of uni doing exercise sports science. Didn't really enjoy that as much as I thought I would. Obviously the practical side of things was great. But I'm very much a visual learner. So, going in and, having like professional ethics and those sort of things were just awful. Absolutely hated it. But all the hands-on stuff I really enjoyed. So when I went and started doing my Cert 3-4, and they were talking in the classroom, and then they're like, okay, we're going now down into the gym to apply things. It was a new way of sort of knowledge for me, and I really enjoyed it because I was like, I wasn't sure exactly what they were talking about, but when they put that, together in the gym visually for me, I started to pick up the concepts really quickly, and it became something that I really enjoyed. So obviously, went through there, graduated onto that. From memory, I think there's only 2 of us in our class that are now still doing training. So shout out to Nick, who was my mate there. We're the only 2 who I think are still coaching. The rest of them, not sure what happened, but they've probably jumped into other paths and areas. So obviously started coaching down at Bayfit Leisure Centre, for those of you who know, in Melbourne, in the western suburbs. Started with my first client, and I remember the first client I had, I was so nervous. I nearly wanted to throw up outside. I had no idea what I was doing. And obviously she was completely fine. She's like, I just want to be a bit fitter. I put together the most basic program possible, 5-minute treadmill warm up, into some machines, into a 5-minute cool down. And I used to then do stretching with clients as well back then. So yeah, completely fine. Obviously I had no idea how to run a business. And then it got to a point where, I was training really regularly. I was, being really active. I thought I was doing all the right things, but my body wasn't really changing. And, I couldn't really figure it out. I was having a lot of digestive issues as well, probably from the years of alcohol and just eating whatever I wanted. Got up to about 86, 87 kilos, which for me was the first time where I was like, okay, something needs to change. So I guess that was my little why moment into I'm obviously starting to coach people now, and I don't look like a coach myself. I can't train myself. I'm going in, I'm still doing all the right things, but I'm not seeing any results. So obviously hired a coach. Big shout out to Andy down at Strength Lab. So obviously my gut was the biggest thing. Believe it or not, this is not something I recommend to everyone, of course, but he put me on a keto diet for 2 weeks. And the reason for that was obviously to basically starve any gut bacteria that was just basically getting to the point of me always like being on the toilet after having any sort of food, any coffee, anything. My gut was just absolutely cooked, right? My digestion was horrible. And I'll be honest, it was the worst 2 weeks of my life, just jumping on this, basically to bodybuilder levels of like chicken and vegetables. That's basically what it was, protein and veg, and then just basically cutting out carbs, maybe a little bit of oil for fats. And that was really it. And I hated it. And every single day I was like, oh, geez, I don't know if I want to do this. Very close to cheating, but he was like, man, just stick on it for 2 weeks. Like, this is temporary. Once your gut issues are fixed, we'll start adding some carbs back in. And then after 2 weeks, of course, symptoms started improving. We started adding in, a carb meal at dinner time. Then we started adding in more carbs. And I got to the point where, over 8 weeks, I think I dropped about 7 or 8 kilos, completely changed my body. All the inflammation was gone, etc. And I finally got to a point where, in the gym, really unlocked, I guess, a new level of intensity. So I thought I was training hard, but really I wasn't tracking my sets, my reps, my weights. I just thought because I was exerting myself and breathing hard in the gym, I was working really hard. But as soon as I implemented that progressive overload in the gym, that's where things really started to take off in terms of the training, and obviously doing that with the nutrition, and sleep was another big one as well, obviously because I used to DJ. So, if I DJ at 3 a.m. on the weekends, my sleep cycle would be all over the shop by the time I get to Monday, 5 a.m. to start training clients for the first time. So obviously, got rid of DJing as well. And then really got to a point where I was like, okay, obviously started learning stuff, but I was like, I want to take this, to the extra level. So pretty much started researching, doing as many courses as I can. Did heaps of internships and stuff and days with, people like Clean Health Institute who were really good, ahead of their time back in the day. Coach Eugene Teo, Australian strength coach, who's Coach Thor, who I think recently done a 510 kilo deadlift, which is absolutely ridiculous. Coach Bax and Ben, and I hired a few coaches myself, so Andy and my current coach Dave Marsh as well. So there's been thousands of dollars, I would say easily. I've probably spent up to 60, 70 grand, actually probably more, on courses and education, to get myself to the point where I feel like, I've got the most knowledge possible, in terms of clientele. So, from there it was about obviously learning, okay, I've got clients now, starting to get busier, but still had a bit of a problem. And the problem was obviously number one, business. So, started to take care of the business side of things in terms of how to actually run a business. But number two was the client experience. So, I was doing sessions and then it would be like, all right, cool, I'll see you next week, and I got to a point where it was, obviously it was frustrating because clients had come in, they'd do this. I'd be like, how'd you go during the week with your nutrition? Yeah, I'm fine, and then we'd obviously weigh them and do all the check-ins and things like that. And they weren't getting anywhere, right? And that was obviously, partly due to me and being new. So invested in a new app experience for clients, and that gave them a bit more accountability. And through the years, we've just basically been potentially swapping apps sometimes, or potentially just upgrading these apps to make it I guess as user friendly and as best in terms of client experience as possible. So the client experience is a massive thing now for me. I spend, I don't even want to know how much, easily, probably $10,000 to $20,000 a year on everything to do with the client experience, whether that be, running events, running challenges, monthly challenges, on top of all the stuff we do in terms of using the app and upgrading the app, as well as obviously, plenty of time as well. But that's what I'm there for. My number one goal is to get clients, the best results in the fastest way possible, but obviously meet them where they're at as well, because everyone's going to be in a different position. Some people are ready to sort of get cracking. You can put them in a severe deficit with some good nutrition, and they're just off to the races. And then you have other clients who've never experienced this stuff before. They have maybe some mindset blocks, some problems with nutrition to begin with, and just don't have any consistency with with their food, or know what to eat, or when to eat, and those sort of things. So I think building that consistency and pattern, everyone is different. For one client, a win for me might be losing a kilo a week. For another, it might just be getting another 2 servings of protein into a couple of meals for the week. So as long as, again, clients are progressing, that's my main, focus. And then it got to the, I guess, pain sort of things, where it got to programming. So, in terms of pain, and, there were a lot of things with me, with my training. I got to a point where obviously I was just lifting as heavy as possible, and then did my lateral meniscus squatting, and then obviously that just bring a range of issues. I was hobbling around for a year, started to get some Achilles tendinopathy, a pain as well, and that lasted for a good 6 to 12 months before I was able to rehab that. And all these things were basically because I didn't fix up my knee. Basically I squatted, felt it, and I was like, it should be all right. And then just basically cut the squats because they started feeling a bit how you going, went to split squats. Then after a few months, they felt a bit how you going. Finally went out for a scan after 6 months, and of course, torn lateral meniscus. So had some issues, still have the torn lateral meniscus, but I've been able to work around this and obviously get to a point where everything's strong enough to support this that I haven't needed to go into surgery. But heaps of niggles, shoulder pain, neck pain, things like that, which resulted in me hiring my latest coach, Dave. Shout out to you, mate. And it has been a bit of a journey. I'm pretty fucked up when it comes to the issues I've had, and obviously getting my body sort of moving the right way again. But we're really starting to get there now, which is fantastic. And a lot of the stuff that Dave has taught me now, I've been able to bring into clients. So back in the day, I'd always look at a movement, I could tell it was wrong. I'd be like, okay, you shouldn't squat like that, or you shouldn't bench press like that. Why is this moving that way? But I couldn't fix it. Whereas in now, I feel like, unless it's a very extreme case that I might need to work again with a physiotherapist or, someone else, I feel like it's an area where a lot of people, generally speaking, if they're having injuries, they're probably, again, it's obviously a technique issue, but a lot of the time they're probably just lacking ranges. So, and I mean like lacking ranges in certain joints. So let's take me, for example. I was lacking a lot of range through my hip before I started doing a lot of daily hip mobility stuff. And as soon as we were able to help unlock my hips, everything else through the body started moving more effectively. So for a lot of clients, again, for a lot of people, just in general, if you're someone who's sitting down, you're doing a lot of that, I find it is generally always going to be a hip issue. A lot of people come to me with knee issues, and that is generally just because their hip can't move properly. So, they're sitting in that position, hip flexors are tightening up. They're in a position where they're just in constant hip flexion. And that's why, generally, they're never able to get into hip extension. So can't get into hip extension. We can't challenge the glutes. If we can't challenge the glutes, they don't get stronger. If the glutes don't get stronger, then the quads take over and we sit in that more, anteriorly dominant position. Same thing in terms of, trying to work your back, for example. So if we're sitting like this, at a laptop all the time, you find, again, shoulders roll forward, neck rolls forward, chest becomes compressed and really tight, and then we're not able to row effectively to actually get a shortened position through your scaps and your back muscles. So again, there's a lot of stuff in terms of mobility and breathing, but then you can bring certain exercises into play to get you to a position where you're actually able to move effectively. So I used to be all about just like fat loss and hypertrophy and strength and all that. But the same thing, I'd keep running into these issues where clients will get stronger to a degree, and then they break down, have a little niggle here and there, and we'd have to keep fixing them. So this is where, again, building them back from the ground up, making sure they have the range to complete these movements first, and then building the strength through there, something that's been, a big game changer for me. And obviously the client community I have is fantastic as well. So, the guys are really, really good. I find a lot of them are really supportive and encouraging to not only themselves but me. So it's a credit to you guys. For anyone who's my client who's listening, you guys have helped build an absolutely fantastic community full of people, and I vow to only make it better for you guys, which is why keep going, keep reinvesting, keep upgrading resources, and giving you guys the best client experience possible. But for me, I think learning over 10 years, probably the main takeaways that I find is that, and this applies, business, life, health and fitness, etc. You're always going to be shit when you start. And I think that's one thing that people don't want to be shit, right? Neither do I. I don't want to be shit. You don't want to do something and be shit at it straight away. It really makes you not want to do it, right? But the work you're avoiding is in the shit you don't want to do. So let's take tracking calories, for example, right? When people tell me, I don't want to track calories, it's too hard, right? So what you're telling me normally is just, okay, you've tried it before, you haven't done it properly, right? Because you've done it a couple of times and then just said, fuck it, I'll just roughly track, or I haven't done it properly. And then that leads you to the point of, okay, I haven't seen any result, so therefore tracking is bad. It's not for me, doesn't work for me, right? Whereas, you will have to take a learning process. There is a learning process to tracking things accurately, doing things accurately. It will take a few weeks for you to get the hang of these sort of things. And then, once you've had a few months at tracking and learning, that's when you can start eyeballing portions. So you do have to be more strict, when you first start doing nutrition. And then from there, you start to, be able to get a bit more flexibility, a bit more leeway. You start to, like I said, understand what's in food, what's in things, and you're able to just go from there. And training is really the same, when you go into an exercise you've never done before, like you go into a bench press, right? How many of you guys have done a bench press and been like, fucking hell, like the bar's flying all over the place. You don't feel stable at all. But you get to, week 5 or 6 and you're like, I've gone from the bar to 40 kilos. I'm feeling more stable. I'm feeling strong. And again, it's a motor unit recruitment thing, right? When you're brand new to the gym, things are just going to feel like they're all over the shop. As your motor unit recruitment improves, as your strength increases, you're just going to get better and better, and your body's going to be more efficient at doing the movement. So I think that's a great metaphor for, like I said, me building my business. Every time I've had an issue with my business where it's gone downwards for whatever reason, I've learned that lesson and been able to build it back up. And I think that's just a constant thing, for you guys as well when it comes to your health and fitness. It's the same with me. It's just a constant battle of trying to just get stronger, create progressive overload. If a nutrition approach isn't working for you, okay, you need to try and change it. If you're having a really stressful period in your life, there's a time where you might have to pull back a little bit, but if you've set up things properly and you understand what you're doing, you'll still be able to make some progress in those times where a lot of people will, unfortunately, just throw in the towel. So these are the sort of main takeaways I want you guys to get from, my 10 years of experience now, 10 plus years, 2025 now. And started 2016. So it's about nearly 10 years then of experience being a PT, which is kind of crazy. Now that I think about it, running your own business, you learn a lot, that's for sure. You do a lot of work, but at the end of the day, it's super rewarding and something, I wouldn't change for the world. So if anyone, again, if you guys are one of those people where, you're on the fence, you've listened to the podcast a few times, you know what me and Liam are talking about, you know what you're about, but you're still not sort of seeing the results that you want, feel free to reach out to me. More than happy to just have a chat, offer some 15-minute strategy sessions, which could be really useful just to me to have a quick look at, what you're doing with your training and nutrition. I've done these before with a few people and they've straight away within, a month dropped 5 kilos or just, fixed up little things that they just didn't realize were making too much of an issue. And I'll do this stuff completely free because I really enjoy. Obviously, I've got my YouTube channel at Action Fitness Nutrition. I've got Instagram at Action Fitness Nutrition. There's heaps of content on there as well that's really going to help you guys go to the next level. And of course, if you guys do need more help, I do have a few coaching spots open. This is one thing where I do only want to take committed people. So if you're someone who's a bit wishy-washy and you don't want to take it up to the next level, without sounding rude, I don't want you. I want people who are ready to go all in, who are ready to be committed and just ready to change their life. And again, it's not going to be perfect. I'm not expecting, and I don't expect all my clients to be perfect. You're not robots. You're not, reading off a ChatGPT script, right? Life happens, shit happens. You've just got to get to a point where if you understand training, you understand nutrition, you can get these needles to move forward and then work that around your lifestyle. That's how we can get you to a point where you'll finally start, seeing changes with your body as well. So what I'll do is I'll leave the link for my coaching below as well as all the links to YouTube, Instagram, etc. If you want to get in contact with me, whether it be, like I said, to book in a free strategy session, just have a quick chat and sort of see if you're on the right page, or whether you, like I said, need that extra help, need that extra accountability and want to take your results to the next level. But I hope you guys have really enjoyed. Hope you've enjoyed, me talking sort of about the last 10 years of, what I've done with clients, what I've done with myself. And I can't wait to see what the next 10 years holds. So next time, obviously, Liam will be back. We'll be starting to talk about a few new different things. But until next time, guys, we'll see you in the next podcast.